This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist and an empowerment mentor for women. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute, nor is it to convey professional, psychological, financial, or medical advice. If you could use such services, please seek them out from someone you trust. Now here is today's episode. Episode 27. Today's episode is sponsored by Nicole Burgess, who is an empowerment mentor. She helps the highly sensitive, the introverted, the intuitive, and/or spiritual woman in breaking free from the good girl facade and blaze her own soul-filled trail. Schedule your discovery call today. Go to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com. Well, welcome, sisters. I am so excited about this episode. I have wanted to talk to Lourdes for a while and finally get to release this episode on astrology. This is something that I'm truly just beginning to dip my toe in. By no means am I well versed in it, but she is. So if you've ever been curious about astrology, how it can really kind of help get you more information about you, or maybe even guide some of those moments in your life, then listen in to today's episode. Well, welcome, sisters. I am so excited about this conversation today. I have Dr. Lourdes Viado, who is a depth psychologist who provides psychotherapy for adults in her private practice in Las Vegas, Nevada, as well as mentorship and consulting services to her clients worldwide. She uses a Jungian approach in her work with clients, integrating mindfulness, dream work, shadow work, metaphor, literature, poetry, yay, and astrology in her work with clients. She is also the host of the very popular Women in Depth podcast, which is conversations about the inner lives of women, what is feared, hidden, unknown, and uncomfortable. And I'm so excited to have you on today, Lourdes, because we're going to talk about one of these very passionate topics of yours, which is astrology.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Can you tell our listeners just a little bit about what is astrology?
Well, astrology is a very ancient system. It began with the ancient Babylonians of looking at the sky and making correlations between where planets were in the sky and things happening, on Earth. So it was a, as above, so below type of connection. And, there are many different kinds of astrology, just as there are many kinds of therapy or approaches to healing. And really, astrology is a tool. A lot of times people feel that astrology limits them or labels them, or they will say that this is what my chart says an Aquarius should do, and I don't do that. And, astrology it's not something that says this is who you are and this is what you will do. Astrology, an astrological chart just lets you know what the possibilities are for you, that range of possibilities, the tools that you have for the job. That Stephen Forrest used this metaphor. It's almost as if at the moment of birth, when you take your first breath, you're on this cosmic diving board, and right before you take that jump into wherever you were born, Houston, Texas, for example, the universe, spirit, God, whoever, said, okay, you have everything you need in this backpack, your tools, it's going to tell you where you're going to get stuck. All your potentials are here. This is the timing for when you might expect things to happen. These are helpers you'll meet along the way. And, then off you go. But astrology is really just, it has a lot of helpful suggestions. That's how I'll put it.
Yes.
You can live your whole life without it. That's fine. But astrology, really, it helps in three ways. It helps you to see the most purposeful and meaningful life that's available to you. It tells you what are the inherent gifts that you have for accomplishing this, and also lets you know what are some of the struggles or challenges that you have. And it also can give you a sense of the weather the astrological weather.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, in this time period, you will be going through a time where there will be a lot of loss. There will be endings, death in the form of transformation, rebirth, regeneration. This is going to be happening for a certain amount of time, and you'll start to feel it here. It'll really peak out here, and this is when you'll start to feel that energy fading. And what I love about astrology is that you really see that everything happens in cycles, and that everything in your chart and everything that's happening to you is for the purpose of you really living the most aligned, I guess, to live your life in a way that's most aligned with the evolutionary intention of your soul. The birth chart, again, it's not fated. It's not going to say this is how you're going to be. It just lets you know that, hey, here's a really good owner's guide if you want to use it. But as we know, we all have purchased something or tried to set something up without looking at the directions. And sometimes it's fine. It works.
Yeah.
Okay. However, if you want to consult this owner's manual, this cosmic soul owner's manual, and really look at it and see, if I do this or this is will really help me in this situation. And then you make your choices. So I just feel like it's a wonderful tool for self-knowledge, for growth, and for navigating the things that life kind of, throws down for you.
I love the way you describe that. And it really is such a tool versus, yes, it's an absolute. And I think sometimes we need to remember those things, that a lot of things that we learn in life are just more of, it's information, it's tools to help guide it. But we all have our own uniqueness. And it's remembering to embrace all those different parts of that uniqueness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you share a little bit about how has astrology really impacted your life and your work? Because I know this really is such a passion of yours. So how has it really impacted you?
Well, maybe I think the best way to answer that would be just to kind of start with how I kind of crossed paths with astrology.
That'd be great.
And it began actually the very first semester of my doctoral program, which was in depth psychology. And I was with a group of other students, and one of the students was an astrologer, and she was offering to look at people's charts. And so, during breaks at lunchtime throughout that weekend, we were at a seminar. People would go to her, and she would talk about their charts very briefly. And so I was curious, and I gave her my birth data, and she just, looked at it really quickly, and she told me a few things, just two things, that really just stunned me. That how did she see that in that, with all these symbols in this circle? What was it in that chart that she saw that and saw this as a possible experience for me? And not only did she see it as a possible experience, how was she able to even kind of pinpoint a time when this happened in my life? It wasn't like a specific time. She said, when you were young. And, and then I said, how could she even pinpoint who the players were? And I was just fascinated and also a little taken aback, because it was a sense of really kind of being seen and exposed, I guess. And I just wanted to know, what's this all about? And I would have to say that while I was doing my doctoral studies, I was also doing astrology studies at the same time. I'd have my papers I'd have to write, and I'd have my astrology books. And the funny thing is, I actually have a whole shelf of astrology books. It's just, my astrology books I have way more than any of the books from my doctoral program, even more than therapy books. And my husband's always laughed that, just how much I've just delved into this. And so that it began with that experience. And then throughout my doctoral process, it was a very long, difficult, very Saturnian time with a lot of really intense losses and crisis. So there was a lot of Plutonic, Scorpionic themes, and then of things just really like things just falling apart, not being able to find my bearings, really feeling overwhelmed and lost at sea, bringing in that Neptunian energy. And, astrology really helped me to navigate that time. I was learning, but I was also attending conferences, getting readings from other astrologers, and it helped me to orient myself, like what the hell is happening in my life right now, and is my life right? Like, am I supposed to be moving in this direction? What do I do? And astrology helped me to figure out, number one, where I was, what direction I was going in, and what were the best ways to work with the energies that were going on. And I also began to see the cycles, that what's happening now is a cycle that really began at this time, and it's bringing the lessons from that time and it's repeating them. And I just really love that symmetry, like the geometry of the symbols. And I think because, being a depth psychologist, Jungian psychologist, I love working with metaphor, with symbols, with images, with dreams. The language of astrology, which is also symbolic, was very natural. And so that was, I would have to say that probably the astrology, who I am as a person, who I am as a therapist, kind of all formed together over the last 12 years. When I first began my doctoral program, which is also when I started with astrology, I was, Jupiter was in Scorpio, and my natal chart, my birth chart has Jupiter in Scorpio. So I was experiencing what would be called a Jupiter return, where Jupiter returns to its place in your natal chart. And it happens every 12 years. And so, I find it interesting because here I am now, again, it's Jupiter and Scorpio, it's 12 years later. And the cycle of learning, being a student, and now as I begin a new cycle of Jupiter, now being at a place where I feel ready and I'm able to share this with the world. And so it's just seeing those cycles with all the other planets, the timing, it just really helps you to see that truly your life is really in divine order. And that's what astrology reflects back. And it just lets you know, like, okay, I feel totally lost. This is overwhelming. I don't know what the hell is going on, but okay, this is where I am. And I find that very grounding. And also, with astrology, you start to learn what the lessons are for this time. And so if you can begin to work with those energies and the lessons, it can be an easier time. Astrology doesn't take away the challenges, but it gives you the tools for understanding and being in them.
Yeah. And I found it fascinating. I did a ideal client reading with you. So I didn't even go through my whole birth chart with you. And the information that you shared with me based upon my chart, it totally blew me away. And I know I've shared that with you before, but it's like what you're saying. It's like, oh my gosh, if you've ever felt like kind of lost or like, am I really on the right path? And, oh, I do know that. And, oh no, that makes sense. And the cycles of it. It's absolutely fascinating to me because before knowing you, I didn't know too much about astrology, and I still don't. But the things that I've heard about it, just for me, I'm just like, oh, okay, I'm not too sure what that's all about. And the way you have gone about explaining it and what you've shown and done, it's just absolutely, it's amazing work in my mind of what the information it can reflect back and give you and help kind of guide in a lot of ways.
Well, what I really, I think the part that's really, it just moves my heart is when I'm able to sit with someone and talk about something, a symbol, a placement in their chart. And for them, it's very, I guess, I don't know if validating is the word, but it's this sense of, oh my gosh, I had no idea that is that's inherent in me, and that's actually, there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing weird. I'm not struggling with that. And it just helps, I think, for people to, I guess, to feel better about aspects of themselves, to love themselves more, to no longer view certain parts of their lives or themselves with shame or, or confusion. I think it really helps. You're really seen on a soul level is how I would describe astrology.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I know what you also do regarding, your shadow work within your depth work that you do, it's really bringing those different parts of yourselves forward, like you're saying, and getting to that place of self-acceptance. Because I want to say kind of your quirkiness or your uniqueness, somehow it's like, it's appropriate and it's you and it's embrace it versus, oh, this is wrong. This is not a good thing or society doesn't like it. It's like, so what? It's part of who you are.
I feel like what astrology does, it's almost like, let's say you suddenly had a reunion with a part of yourself that you maybe forgot about or was put away because you were ashamed of that part or others didn't approve of that part. And suddenly this part is coming to you and embracing you, and you didn't realize how much you missed this part of you and how good it feels to have this part of you back in your life. I guess it's kind of like a sense of what astrology can help with and what it can do for someone.
Very powerful, bottom line, very powerful. Well, Lourdes, you said that when I was talking to you before, you said there is a certain type or a certain kind, I don't know if I've got the word correct, of astrology that you do. Can you share what that is?
Sure. So the type of astrology that has really resonated with me and touched my soul, and the type of astrology I practice is what's called evolutionary astrology. Now, within evolutionary astrology, there are specific approaches to it also. There are different schools. So, just like in therapy, there are different kinds of CBT. There are different types of trauma therapy. And then you have the founders of those schools who have a specific take on it. It's the same thing with astrology. Okay. So even within evolutionary astrology, the type of astrology that really speaks to my soul is the person at the forefront, the astrologer of this is Stephen Forrest. So in this approach to astrology, the evolutionary astrologer looks at the chart in two layers. And one of them is, pretty much what you would consider, the regular approach, standard approach, in that we see, your strengths, your challenges, how you are in relationships, the part of you that nurtures needs to be nurtured, all of those specific parts. That is part of the approach. And when it comes to this part of the chart, I also love to bring in very practical aspects, this is how you may experience Venus, the part of you that desires connection, attracts, and then specific things that person can do with that part of themselves. With evolutionary astrology, there's also a second part of the chart, or a second layer. So the chart is actually seen from two different perspectives, that of human psychology, and then of what your larger evolutionary purpose is. So what this means is that every human being also is a soul with a specific intention for this lifetime. And the natal chart is a vehicle for fulfilling that aim. With this part, with looking at the chart through the lens of evolutionary astrology, this is, as Stephen Forrest says, it can be just kind of like an excellent suggestion. If you don't do this part, it's not like your life is going to fall apart. However, if it resonates with you to live a life that's purposeful, then you want to look at this deeper layer of the chart. And when we do this, we focus on a point in the chart that's called the North Node and also the South Node. And I truly believe, I agree with many evolutionary astrologers in the school of Stephen Forrest, that the North Node is the most important point in your chart, and that honestly, if all you do in this lifetime is your North Node, you'll be good. Okay, because
interesting.
and what the North Node The north node has to be seen along with the south node, which is the opposite point in the chart. Mm-hmm. And you'll see when you look at a natal chart, the two of them will be directly opposite from each other. What these nodes reveal is your larger evolutionary purpose based on prior life dynamics, prior life karma. So there is the view of past lives. However, even if you don't, if past lives don't resonate with you, if the language of reincarnation doesn't sit with you, that's fine. We can put that aside and just say, okay, this is something, these are themes, these are situations that that will keep you from really moving towards what is meaningful and purposeful for your soul. The North Node is really, in evolutionary astrology, it tells you what is the highest expression for your soul to be aligned with its purpose. So this polarity of north and south nodes reveal kind of the dynamics around which you can either fall back into, like as if you are sleepwalking, not really conscious, kind of going through the motions, or you can be pushed into something more meaningful. And every person who you sit with and you talk to them about these nodes, they 100% know exactly what you are describing or what this means to them in a very powerful way. So it's I think there was a quote, I can't remember the name of the person, but he said that if you want to know your future, look at your past. And the north and south nodes reveal that. The south node reveals where you get stuck, what is something that depletes you or drains you, even though if it's actually very rewarding and something you're very good at. And the North Node describes the evolutionary cutting edge of your soul. There's an astrologer named Michael Luton in New York, and he described the South Node is the bottle and the North Node is the meeting.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So that's really what is the key difference between evolutionary astrology and other approaches is that emphasis on the North and South nodes.
Yeah. And so much as you were talking about that, right, I was like, man, in my mind, when I focus a lot more on the spiritual aspect of things, it's like this is just another, what do I want to say, almost like a prong of that spiritual practice, because you really are going, like you're saying, to your soul. You're going into that depth work there. And whether you've done through your own self-reflection, you've done through therapy, you've done through mentoring, this is another tool to kind of affirm, hey, here are these stuck points, and here's ways that I can kind of look back and go, what could I do differently? So that, as you're going and you're looking at your North Node, really fulfilling what you're put on this planet for, and heed that calling versus, like you're saying, and I know I've said this in a different episode too, but I call it going into the trance, and what you said was sleepwalking. But there is that, right? We can kind of wake up and go back to sleep throughout our life, but it's really like, okay, let's be intentional and stay awake and go towards that purpose. That's so powerful.
There are a lot of astrologers, really good astrologers. And again, just because, one astrologer has a different approach, it doesn't dismiss the other approaches. Just like, with the mental health field or different doctors, it's important for you to find the type of astrology that resonates with you. And this may not resonate with everyone. So again, as I describe astrology, I just want the listeners to know that this is not the only way to look at a natal chart. There are lots of ways that work. There's more than one way to climb the mountain,
right?
And it has to be what speaks to you.
Yeah.
And so, if you are going to be, looking to get an astrology reading done, really, do your research around if that's the type of astrology you want. There are really good astrologers who do things that are very, I want to meet someone. When will I meet them? What will they be like? That type of thing. Or very, I want to make these decisions about how I invest my money. And there are financial astrologers out there who are very good at what they do. And so you just have to see what speaks to you. And I think that just like therapy or any other type of healing occupation, that therapist or healer's approach is also going to be a reflection of that therapist or healer.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like how you're saying that too. And it is doing the due diligence. Maybe it's as you're reading through the information on their website, or if you have other friends, family members who have had a reading done before, talking with them and kind of getting their feedback. And again, it's going to be through their perception of things, but it may give you that sense of that person that you're wanting to go meet. And I'm wondering, Lourdes, do you have any other, I guess, tips or suggestions on how to even, I guess, kind of figure out what it is? Like, for example, when you and I were talking, I was specifically looking for a certain thing that I knew you offered, but that was through different conversations. And so if somebody's looking to just get their birth chart read, but they don't know the different types of astrology that are out there, I mean, is there, and I'm sure this is a very varied answer, right? But is there like certain ways to go about, if you've not ever done it before, kind of how to kind of narrow your search down?
It's a really tough one. What I would suggest, if you're just kind of doing this cold, you don't know anyone who's an astrologer, anyone who's had a reading done, is to base your decision on, if you connect with the astrologer's content on their website, if you like what they're reading, if you understand it. Because here's another thing that's really important with astrology. The astrologer has to be able to translate it to you.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I was learning and getting different readings, and I would have an astrologer tell me that Neptune was squaring my sun. And I was like, what? What does that mean? I had no idea what that meant. And
I'm laughing only because I'm like, I have no idea what that means. I have to go and get a translation. Yeah.
And so that's not really helpful to anyone, and so you can tell by reading an astrologer's website how well they translate the language of astrology.
Yeah.
You don't want to know that you have, that right now there's a Mars-Saturn conjunction. You're like, okay. And so what does that mean? So you really, it depends on, where you are as far as your own knowledge of astrology. And I think that's the most important thing is go to, just Google and start reading their blogs. A lot of astrologers do YouTube videos. See if you like their energy, if they explain things well. Because again, it doesn't matter how good they are, because there are really good astrologers, but they don't know how to speak in English, if you know what I mean. They speak astrologies really well to other astrologers, but it has to be something that you can understand. And so one of the questions I actually ask when I'm about to do like a full natal reading is, one in the questionnaire I send out is, how familiar are you with astrology terms, and would you like me to use them in your reading? And that gives me a sense of, actually, I'm not familiar with them at all. And that lets me know that I have to shift gears, because I can't say things like Neptune square your sun, because the person will have no idea what that means. The other thing too, if you're getting a reading, if the astrologer doesn't already do this in their process of, I guess, scheduling you, if they have any kind of questionnaire or intake that they do, it's important to let the astrologer know what you want to focus on, because a natal chart has so much information.
Yes.
I mean, it is layers upon layers upon layers. In fact, I just did a webinar for our colleague and dear friend Tamara Powell, and we just focused on Mars. And that was enough. It was just, there's so much just with that one planet. So we looked at, the parts of us that deal with conflict, that deal with asserting ourselves, that have to, be courageous and stand up for what we believe in, and what that means in your natal chart. And we went into that, and that was, so much already. So it's helpful for me when someone says, I'm having these things happening in my relationship with my daughter. I want to understand it and see what are some best ways to respond. That's really specific. Then I won't be talking to you about what's happening in your career, what's happening, with your daily routines, or, so let an astrologer know, because I remember doing readings where I thought, this is all great information, but I just really wanted to know about this one thing.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
And that makes so much sense as you're saying that, because, I was laughing when you were saying that you and Tamara were talking about Mars, and I'm like, oh, I can see how. Yeah, because you know so much about this and can share so much information. It's like, to come in there like, I don't know, just tell me what you can know here, what you can see. It's like, oh my, how many
Right. Yeah.
hours do we have?
Yeah. You don't even really know where to start.
Yeah.
So it's always helpful to just, you know, maybe you do want a little bit of like a broad or general, spend some time on, okay, just tell me a little bit about my natal chart, you know, and then, but I really want to know about, the specific thing. And then the astrologer can also actually just address your concern while describing your natal chart.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Makes sense. That totally makes sense. And I know on your website that you have up that we'll talk about here in just a second, you have also done various blogs. And so again, if people are not, sure of what astrology is, or they want to find out more about you, you have tons of information, or you're putting more and more information out there on that, describing certain times that, well, I want to call it times of seasons. Again, I don't
seasons
have the,
is a good word. Yeah.
okay, because that's like, I don't have the terms that you use. But it's full of information. And so when you have your chart, it's like, oh, really? So it's really great. So let me just share the website with everybody really quick. So if you want to find out more about Lourdes, you can go out to reflectingsky.com, and I'll definitely have that in the show notes. But again, she's got some blog information out there where you can read a little bit more about these different seasons and kind of get a feel for some of the stuff that, her and I are talking about on today's show. But she's just, Lourdes is just, you were just truly a wealth of information, not just with astrology, but I love how you had this parallel process when you were doing your doctoral program. So I'm thinking, holy cow, is that intense to be doing both of these?
Yeah, it was.
I can't even imagine. I truly can't. But how you have taken the Jungian piece of it, that depth, and really, I call it married these two things together. And the symbolism is huge in Jungian psychology. And then like you're talking about too with the astrology piece of it and the sacred geometry and all that good stuff that goes with it, it's just amazing how you can make all these connections, and you do with the work that you provide and that you do for the world.
Oh, thank you, Nicole. You are too kind.
I think that you really are such a depth psychologist. I mean, you bring that forward so much, and it's amazing what you glean from. Sometimes it seems like just a little bit of information, but because of all the research and the trainings that you've gone to and the learning that you've done, it can really, what do I want to say, even like transport women into even a deeper degree of where they are in their lives. And I think it's amazing work. And part of what we're talking about today too, right, it is waking up. It's really coming back to your core, your center, and being able to embrace all those different parts of yourself. And it's just, I think it's incredible work, and it's fun too.
It is a lot of fun. Yeah. I love it. Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
I always have some kind of astrology book or article in my bag or on my phone. It's just, if I have any downtime, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, and again, part of it is, right, and various episodes that I've got on here are so many entrepreneurs that I talk with, right? And it's fascinating when you're talking with these entrepreneurs, these incredible women, these leaders, right? The passion comes through with what you're sharing today. And it has in these other episodes that I've done. It's just like, oh, I get to do this, and I've done this, and here's the things I've learned through the time. And it's like, you're definitely, heading towards the north node, you're heading towards the passion, or you're on your north node, right? You're in that zone because you just light up as you talk about it. So
thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, is there anything else that you really wanted to share that maybe I haven't asked about regarding astrology or the work, or how it can really help women, I guess in the different seasons of their lives or where they're at in their lives? Anything else that I've missed or didn't touch on?
I think one of the things I'll say is that, a lot of people will go out and buy some books because they're interested in astrology and want to, learn about their own charts and, take the knowledge that they're learning from the books. And I just want to remind everyone that there are a lot of really good books out there, of course, and not so good, just like with any other topic.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what you'll find are what we call cookbook astrology books, where it'll say, okay, this chapter is on the sun. So this is sun in Aries. This is sun in Taurus. This is sun in Cancer. And it just goes through, and then it does it for every sign. I want to stress to those of you who read those that, that describes what the sign is by itself, like your sun in Aquarius. However, most books aren't able to connect how your sun in Aquarius interacts with your moon in Cancer. What we call our angles, if you ever look at your, not the angles, the aspects, whenever you look at your natal chart, you'll see a bunch of lines in the middle. And the lines describe the energetic interaction between those planets or points in your chart. And some of these interactions are really easy and some are harder. So let's say that you have Sun in Leo, but it is making a challenging connection to Saturn. Maybe, there's a difficult connection between Saturn and your sun. So you're reading this description of Leo, and Leo is supposed to be confident, radiant, wants to be on stage, and you're just going, not really me. But if you look at your chart, an astrologer can let you know that, well, you have this very strong connection between your sun and Saturn, and whatever Saturn touches, it restricts. There's a limiting effect. There's a dampening. There's a sense of struggle. With Saturn, there's there's usually a lot of fear and self-doubt. So that totally shifts the standard, description of what Leo energy is supposed to feel like. And so I just want to remind everyone that, when you read a lot of these cookbook type books, when you're just wanting to learn about astrology, take the descriptions with a grain of salt, because they're describing, it's almost like a recipe for some really yummy meal.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't read about putting it all together. You just look at each ingredient separately, and it doesn't really describe how that one ingredient interacts with this other ingredient and what happens in that interaction.
Makes sense. Do you have any recommendations, like if somebody is kind of starting out, that there are books out there that kind of help describe more versus just kind of like looking at this one piece of it, where it's, you need to look at this and this and this, not that unless you're doing a full-on training type of thing, but do you have something that...
I think if someone's just learning, you do have to start with the cookbooks, because you can't really start, that would be like another level after you've gotten kind of the basic building blocks.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want, for the average person who doesn't know much about astrology, wants to learn, to take that into consideration when maybe you're reading things that don't really seem to resonate, or like, I don't know, that's not my husband, or that's not my child. This is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, you're seeing that description in isolation.
Gotcha. That makes so much sense. So yeah. Oh, good. Well, again, Lourdes, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this great information. And truly, again, it's just like another lovely avenue of spirituality going on here. So I just love doing the connection of the soul work and helping women really, open up to other possibilities of healing and looking deeper within inside of themselves and seeing what comes up.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you for listening. Do you want to receive episodes directly to your inbox or stay informed on my latest offerings? Then I invite you to go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/podcast, and there is a button for you to sign up for my newsletter. Thank you again.